I mean, it's a conversation at the end of the day, shifting the conversation around the South African cricket team and that narrative that exists.
These type of conversations are happening in casual commentary at braais at home with people that are just watching the game and those sort of things. And we're wanting to do nothing different than having that same sort of conversation, perhaps just lift the lid somewhat, lift the caliber of the conversation, because we've already peeked behind the curtains or under the covers, if you want to use that term, right?
As soon as you get clear on your motivations and your purpose and your intention, a lot of things can start falling into place.
Yeah.
A lot of things become automated. A lot of things all of a sudden goes, oh, okay, cool, that's how I'm going to do it. So the hows become very clear when the whys are clear.
These guys are hopeful that they're winners. They're not seeing themselves as winners entering it. Despite their having illustrious careers, it's a matter of coming together under the Proteas brand is where things come unstuck in a way.
So the identities of our local cricketing ecosystem has been completely eradicated at a provincial level. There is no longer that sort of, oh, I want to play for this team. Yeah.
It's like taking someone that's not familiar or not comfortable or used to being free and not shown how to handle that freedom. It's the same sort of analogy when we start talking about a playing philosophy of playing with freedom.
All exciting stuff that we're going to get into, right? All exciting stuff that we're going to get into. I'm already like salivating a little bit, to be honest.
Okay, I'm ready when you are.
Right. So Russell, sorry, I just want to take a sip of water here quickly. Oh, geez. Sorry, I just choked there.
Where's your sippy cup? Where's your sippy cup, eh?
Oh, yeah, I must get my sippy cuppy. I tell you what. All right, topic for today, choking. It is the big bugbear, I think, in South African cricket, right? Is this idea, this tag that's been associated with our team. And it's been interesting to watch the evolution of that and notice it just as an observer from the outside, how it sort of shifted from we are chokers to every single effort to battle that tag, battle that idea. I can't remember exact details. I don't have all the articles with me. But I remember under Graham Smith and Proteas Fire, there was a concerted effort towards shifting the tag. And even as recently as last year in the World Cup, when we lost to Australia in the semi-final, it's one of the first things that was said. We didn't choke. So it was almost like we were outplayed this time. Like we played our best cricket on the day. We were outplayed, and so it's still there. It's evolved. It's gone in different directions, but the tag lingers. What's your thoughts on this whole concept and idea of the Proteas team associated with this word, essentially?
Yeah, I look, obviously it's coming on a long time now. So the tag is something that I think it's a fair judgment. It's a little bit harsh at times because I don't think they choke consistently at times. Sometimes it is a circumstantial failure where a game does allow to get away from you and you just kind of lose the game from nowhere. So I don't necessarily agree with the fact that they are chokers in every situation. There are times that the distinguishing factor sometimes is choking versus panicking, right? Where, like with scoreboard pressure, for instance, you start feeling the tension, the pressure, and it starts getting the best of you. Now, as it's loosely defined as choking, there's different ways to define it, but choking essentially is losing a match from a winning situation. So you're winning, you're in the flow, in the zone even, and things are going well, and you come to a critical point in the game where the pressure starts increasing, and something happens that triggers this, right? Normally it's something that's obscure, it's not directly cricket related. Words get said, something, the incident in the game, and all of a sudden the momentum that you once had is now shifted, and therefore you let go of a winning position to lose. So I don't necessarily think they constantly choking as Proteas. I think at times the pressure of the situation and they start panicking and all those things come into. So we need to kind of look at it and see what is actually unfolding in that specific moment in time. And is it a choke? And is it maybe just a sense of panic? But nonetheless, having said all of that, there is a tendency for the Proteas team to consistently play below their potentials, right? Because they're a hugely talented bunch of cricketers, particularly when they put on that brand, Proteas, because these are world-class athletes that are being snapped up from anywhere across the world. Yet when they come under the Proteas banner, for some other reason, they succumb to certain pressures, whether it's self-imposed, they're projecting this, whether the lingo of the tag that's there, it's too heavy and too weighty, and they're kind of like prophetically spoken over themselves, right? Then it comes and haunts them, and it bites them in the butt, in a sense. So it is something that they firmly need to acknowledge and not necessarily shy away from, rather embrace it, because I think it could be a silver lining aspect of their, reaching potentials one day where they become champions. But I think they're not necessarily relating to it in the most friendly manner. You should almost embrace this thing and move on from it.
Yeah, I think as you were speaking there, my head sort of goes to this idea that, and I think what we've done better recently is we've played World Cups better. What I mean by that is, in the past, we would, even in the group stages, not be great. And with our team, I always feel like there's a struggle, which is something that's very much ingrained in our nation, is the idea of resilience and struggle, things that have been overcome, which maybe alludes to some of the stuff from our previous conversation. But at the same point in time, it doesn't really necessarily set us up for excellence. It doesn't set us up to go freely express, because there's always this idea that we've got to come from behind. And so my sense often is that we first have to have our backs against the wall as South Africans before we can show who we really are. It's sort of something that's been built in, even the whole Graham Smith idea of the Protea fire. That was my big sort of resistance personally against that, was the Protea regenerates after a fire. So we always have to go through the fire first so that we can regenerate. And normally post World Cups, we dominate. Like whatever the next series is, we go play that exceptionally well. So it's, so that to me is a defining sort of thing that happens with this team, if you watch the pattern of it play out. And so even if they get better at things, like we lose to Zimbabwe in a T20 International World Cup. We lost last year, I think, to Netherlands in the 50 over World Cup. And so we always get ourselves into these situations where it's reliant on the weather and the run rates of other teams. And, we hope we've got to win this game by a certain margin just to qualify. We always seem to find ourselves in those types of situations rather than we're top of the log. We've secured our semi-final playoff. We're busy what we need to be busy with. We're on track. We're focused, maybe relaxed and calm and ready to go and just be the greatness that we already are, be the winner, be the champion that we already are. Rather, we're fighting this consistent battle to prove that. And I don't know if that is optimal. I don't know if that'll get us there. It hasn't, right? It hasn't worked for the last 20 whatever years.
It almost seems to be an occasion of what I often refer to as an identity crisis, in a sense. If you can remember our conversation, a while back, we spoke about how when we were separated and then we came together under a unified brand now, we kind of needed to define that clearly. And then we obviously got a flag, a name, a brand, and all those sorts of things. But we didn't really find a way to really gel and to work together, right, in my view. So we didn't actually assign a real label on us and what we're all about. And I know when you're inside those team spaces, there's very much kind of insinuation that we clearly know what we're about, who we play for, what we all, what we kind of striving for, what we can do, those sorts of things. But I think really the ultimate, because it's an identity crisis, as I'm suggesting, is when you put something under pressure, do you really overcome, right? Or can you maintain only your identity when it's in good times, when things are like fair weather type of experiences, when the game is going your way? Then you kind of portray that ideal image or identity of who you would like to be. So for me, it's like coming from this dormancy of isolation in times past and wanting to show the world that you can compete at this level and you can hold your own. And we haven't quite got that. And the World Cup lack of winning has actually been the evidence of saying, you're not necessarily one of the world stage best. So you can't accept the champion persona as yet. And we so desperately want this because we haven't given ourselves a true identity that we're all buying into, that we all feel resonant of. So it's almost like an indictment of we're not all clicking 100% together to say, yes, indeed, we are a winning nation and a champion. And therefore, because of the weight of that, not having it, it feels when we go into it and strive to get it, it gets further and further away from us. It's like trying to grab at something and then it kind of eludes you consistently. So that's why I think that in attempting to go at the World Cup, it really needs to be how well do we know ourselves to be this image of who we are? Is it really something that's ingrained in each one of us? And are we truly reflecting the majority of people we're representing? I mean, we're not going to rehash the conversation of yesterday, but this is why some people felt like when you're attempting to go for the cup success, is it going to mean success for me, who you're actually representing? And do the players actually feel that they truly, genuinely represent the people that they're playing, on behalf of?
Yeah.
So that for me is where the tag kind of comes into play. And let alone the fact that the game in and of itself is a pressured game. It's
Yeah.
runs, wickets, and there's specific outcomes and metrics that you have to abide by and rules to abide by.
Yeah.
And that in itself just creates the added pressure when you
Yeah.
have a fragile identity or
Yeah.
fragile ego. Have you
Yeah.
seen the situation, for instance, when we've completely, in last World Cup, as an example, right? We've completely dominated and broke through records, 300 plus, those sorts of things, 400 almost, you know what I mean? And then you go from that instance where we're celebrating the fact that there's been a change of guard, a change of leaf, a different approach. Now we want to celebrate this, but it's premature because the very next game we lose against the Netherlands, which
Mm,
is a team that barely qualified to get in. So
mm,
how do this disparity is constantly being
mm.
rehashed. So the
Yeah.
point is we're not as firmly believing on and secured on what we're all about, which means we're still very fragile in the persona of what we're all about. So that
Mm,
cultural aspect that's happening within the team, it's not as secure.
mm.
And that's just clearly evident.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons you and I are having these conversations, right, to maybe make it clear for everyone, is that I think both of us share a belief and an understanding that, and I'm going to say it in my words, I'm sure you have different words to express it, but we both have the understanding that performance is an inside out job. It's the as you refer to it often, the soft skills on the inside. It's that stuff that drives the performance. And you allude to it very nicely in sort of what you say there, right? That the identity, our identity, how we see ourselves, our self-view is an internal thing. It's not an external thing. It's not something that you go to the nets and hit out. It is work you've got to go do on the inside to understand yourself, where you come from, who you are, what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you fit into a team, how secure you are within yourself. It is such a core foundational element to performance, that whole idea of just how do I view myself? Because let's make it like really simple. You go into any area within South Africa, there will be perceived stronger cricketing schools and there will be perceived weaker cricketing schools. Whenever you see a strong cricket school, or I was at a school that wasn't one of the strong ones, right? We were sort of middle of the pack, let's say. So there was schools we'd go play against and we would beat them, we would smash them. And then there would be schools that we play against where we knew we were going to be the ones being smashed. But it's always interesting for me that in terms of how we see ourselves as a school, as a team, as a sort of whatever it might be, an organization, that whenever my team had to go play, and this was my biggest battle with them, if I can say it like that, was whenever we played against the perceived stronger team, and in reality they might have players that's more skilled, we downgrade ourselves. And whenever we play against the perceived stronger teams, we upgrade ourselves. And so my biggest battle was always to say, no, we're the same. They're the same age as you. Like, we've got to give ourselves the best chance, right? It's maybe a simple example of something that plays out consistently within our South Africa. And I'm not saying it's unique to South Africa. It will probably happen all around the world. I think it's a human condition that we don't spend enough time actually understanding ourselves, our identity. How am I thinking about myself? Maybe just another offhandish example. So a lot of people, that's maybe more relevant to cricketers and individuals, is a batting position. I buy my identity so much into one batting position or one bowling position. And then I'm in a team and I don't bat there. And I also often then refer to as you're having an identity crisis, And so I think when we go to World Cups, potentially, don't know with certainty, but my sense is we go to World Cups with the identity of still needing to prove ourselves, as you say. We don't go to World Cups with the identity as the person that's going to put that medal around my neck at the end of it. We still have this, and I think that's, we still have this idea that it's something we have to do first before we can identify as that. And that lives in cricket often, right? I got to score a 50 at that level first before I know I belong. And so I don't think we feel like we belong at the world stage yet because we haven't won this thing, versus the cricketer who rocks up and says, no, I belong in this team. The 50 will eventually come. The win will come because the inside, the inner game, the soft skills is in place. It's sort of, it's the gateway through which that performance happens.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to where you very much started, because I think you circled back beautifully there.
Yeah.
I think our approach in South African spaces in particular is an external to internal. They're definitely going and striving, doing the sweating on the outside, making and working hard so that they can get the victory and then feel like the champion, right? Or then want to label themselves. So they desperately trying to grab at something that really should start on the inside. If you're not feeling worthy, something external on the outside, a new car, a new house, a new whatever, is not going to make you feel any differently on the inside. You may have that sensation, but it's not genuine, because as soon as I take the car away and the house away, then you lose that identity again. So it's very much something that's not sustainable. It's not something that's not secure. It's not principally strong enough, right? So when we attempt as a culture or as a nation, we attempt to try and push the external approach to get internal stuff changed, it's obviously not going to work. So in South African culture, when we look at inside cricket spaces, for instance, our approach has always been to go and prove to the world, no, we can dominate and play this game. We are worthy enough to be at this stage. And therefore, we have this bullish way, this bravado, this in your face. And it shows throughout our attempts at the way we play. If you look at the playing styles, we've always had this fast bowlers that's going to be intimidating oppositions, right? Now, every team has fast bowlers around the world. But we in particular add extra energy on those fast bowlers. We get loud and noisy in the opposition's ear, because we're kind of wanting to intimidate others, because we felt like if we boss or bully them, they'll succumb to the pressure that we kind of dominating over them. And that's the way we're going to win cricket matches. That's been a consistent trend. I've even been managers of SAA teams where that's the strategy. Particularly, let's say, as you just mentioned earlier, to lesser countries. So we're in Bangladesh, and then we instruct 1 or 2 or 3 players. It's your job to get under the skin of the opposition. And that's our strategy to win matches. And I mean, so that can work in the short term, but when we have to succumb to the pressures placed on us, maybe through skill or some other form of dominance, when they have a bowler bowling 150 and we're nicking off when the conditions are not going our way, then we crack and fail, because our identity is based on, let me go and bully you into submission. Let me take the game and kind of dominate over you. That's been our approach consistently. And it's a South African way. And it almost is, for lack of a better way of saying, if I revert back to yesterday's conversation, a rugby approach. The whole phraseology. Let's go take them in and go smash them, right? And that type of thing doesn't work in the gentleman's game. And I know cricket has moved along past a gentleman's game. It's gone very much commercial, about a whole bunch of other gimmicks and so forth, right? The game has moved on. But the core essence and the spirit of it is the gentleman spirit, right? Where in that you cannot necessarily come with this dominant, overpowering type of approach. If you look at the West Indies and their success for what is it, 2 decades, the longest running success, they had intimidating bowlers, but they didn't use tactics of shouting in your ear and all. If you watch Fire in Babylon as a documentary series, right? But our approach in South Africa is actually trying to bully and intimidate you and kind of almost put on a show that you kind of just submit and you surrender to our cause, that this game is ours. And I'm telling you, I can mention names because I don't think it's going to help us just being skirting around it. So in that particular situation, we had senior players that were representing the Proteas, and actually that particular individual became a Proteas captain eventually, where I needed to go in as a manager because he was facing disciplinary action for that tactic. So, and the guy's name is Dean Elgar. Yeah. So Dean Elgar was tasked to go and yap underneath a Bangladeshi as a batsman to get him out. So in this regard, who was the guy that instructed him? It was Paul Harris. So Paul Harris is telling a mini-me version of himself in Dean Elgar, please go and intimidate this guy, because this is how we're going to win in these conditions, because on these conditions, skill for skill, we can't outbeat them. We can't win them here. But we need to show that we can win cricket matches against a lesser side, but not on just general, goodwill terms of let's just man for man and let's compete. No, let's use unsavory type of approaches to the game, right? An unspirited way of play, if you want to call it that. And for the most part, that's embarrassing, actually, to be honest, for people in South Africa who would like to come from a little bit more mature experience of cricket. It can be far more of a gentleman's game and far more of entertainment, other than just using that sort of gimmicky type of approaches and getting wins. Is wins really, what price are we paying for those wins? And what are we really celebrating? Do we really need to dominate people? Must people be suppressed and pushed down so we can feel higher and better? Because then that's a false sense of realness of who we really are. So our identities, our winning personas, right, of dominating matches or nations when we play series, right, it's all about trying to show more strength. And it's typical when we rise up against Australia, because Australia's got this pushback, the same style, because we're almost similar in type of cultural reforms. And that's why we have ball scratching, and that's why we have the bravado incident, right? Of shoulder bumping and whatever. That series was it's hugely documented. But it's because of our aggressive approach that we've labeled as this is the way we do things. This is the South African style. But as you know, in any bully, in any school across this country, whether it's private schooling or public schooling, the bully's persona, there's a lot of hurt that comes from that. And hurt people hurt others, right? But essentially, if we address the real core of the problem, we can get rid of that bully mentality, because heal people heal others too, right? So we don't necessarily need to have it. We can have a little bit more fairer or more mature expression of the game and grow up as a nation. Because I feel like we don't have the right to hold this cup or drink from it, because we will choke, because the purity of what's on offer for us, we're not necessarily worthy of it as yet, in the manner in which we're approaching it, the manner in which we are trying to get the victory. If we're going to bully to get that cup, then in my view, I don't want to drink from it. That's just me as a South African. And this is why I would say, don't win this cup with that attitude and that approach. Because I don't think it's the most worthy thing or the most celebratory thing to have for all of South Africa. So yeah, I said a lot there, Jody, but
no,
keep going.
No, I mean, and I might tag on to parts of that. So I sort of, as you were speaking, I keep thinking about, while I'm listening, obviously, there's this sort of little thing that happens in my head here, and it says there's an edge in performance. And there's the saying around success, right? So it's my brain connected these two thoughts. There's the saying about success. Success doesn't, something about, I don't know the full quote, but success reveals your character. And so that's almost the sense I get through what you say there, is we're actually showing our identity in that edge of performance where things are getting really, really tough. We're actually showing that we don't know who we are because we come from this place of bravado. We come from this place of toughness. We come from this place of we're going to bash them into the ground. And recently we've been doing it with a bat too. We have batters that are skilled enough to just go bully other bowling attacks. But in the moments when it matters, when the edge of performance, that edge gets sharper and sharper and it can cut quicker, we fail because our identity isn't defined as that tough, hard cricketer through and through, out and out. It's fragile. And so in the toughest, strongest, most pressurized moments, it crumbles. And it physically crumbles, right? So we see our players on their knees, in tears. We see that. Why? Because they've crumbled. I always think to myself, it's just a cricket game. Like, I can't, like, don't get me wrong, right? I understand the investedness in this whole idea. I mean, you see when players retired, what's the one thing you regretted as a South African cricketer, not winning a World Cup? Like, that story is every single player who's played for South Africa, if they retire and they've played in that sort of 50-over team back in the day and the T20 teams, like, that's the one thing. That's the mission, right? That's the goal. And so I think because it's something that we place so far out there, it is this big mountain, this big obstacle that we've got to climb. It doesn't come. It just stays ahead of us the whole time. It's just something that's there. Versus the identity of I am that already. I am standing on that mountain already. I am that winner. I am that champion. We are that person already. Even though we haven't achieved it, I feel like then it's easy to come. Then it's not something that's always in the distance that I'm chasing after. You know, if you chase after something, you're still chasing it. Versus saying I have this thing, right? I can see in my mind, I can see on the inside that is my reality, and I feel as like a winner feels, and I think like a champion thinks. And so I don't have to go bully. I don't have to go do these other tactics. I must just show up as my exceptional, most best self. That is the person that has won this thing already. And that work, in my mind, is the work that you and I do. But that work is not work that, as a generalization across South Africa, that's embraced and understood as the value and the importance it has. Like you said earlier, I always say we run to the nets. I want to see you sweat. You know, we very much speak the language of first at the nets, last to leave. You know, and so kids grow up with that's what it's about. And I'm not saying that stuff isn't important. You know, you have to have the skill because, like you said, skill on skill. You know, we might not beat some other teams in the world. We might, right? We've got some of the most skilled cricketers in the world. But we believe somehow that that's all that's needed. We don't go to the other place where we look in the mirror and we say, right, who's the person that's got to go do those skills? And is the person developed well enough and to the full extent of what the person can be developed to? And that's an ongoing process, just like skills is an ongoing process, you know. But I don't know if we're yet as a society that effectively engaging with it and that effectively managing it and sort of helping our cricketers understand and our general cricketing community understand that there's more to the game than just running to the nets and running a good fielding practice. You know, there's more to it.
The subtlety, the change or the shift is very subtle. It's very small, but it has huge outplay, right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
You have to manage it succinctly all the way through. It will have the ripple effect. Now, small bang, but it will ripple all the way. It will have a massive outcome. And the shift that we need to have is simple, as you said it earlier, right? We don't need to be striving for the pot of gold. I'm going to use the phraseology we used yesterday. Don't strive for the win, as in the trophy cup. Walk worthy of that cup, which means be a champion now, worthy of deserving of that cup. And I feel as a nation, this thing is eluding us because all our attempts, the different angles in which we're approaching this, we are not addressing that inner champion. We're not addressing the fact that we are worthy of holding these cups. Collectively, as a group, who we represent, all those things that goes with it, we're not walking worthy that the cup is actually bestowed on us as a worthy recipient of receiving that championship. So therefore, when it eludes us, it should be a matter of, okay, for what reasons are we falling short of not just do we do more things on the outside, find different ways to have, release shots, maybe different tactics, different coaches. Those are not the answers. It's walking worthy, which simply suggests that you're already coming from a frame of, I have over an abundance of capabilities, and I need to fine tune it based on a character, right? Let me quickly pause and give you an example. So, for instance, when we were the closest version of winning this cup, what was? Let me get it right. Is it 99? Which one is the one with
Donald and Klusner?
Donald and Klusner, yes. That was the one we were the closest to getting it, right?
Yeah. One run away to getting into the final. So definitely the closest.
Exactly. I suppose the one in South Africa in 2003 is also a very similar one where we misread the rain.
The weather. Yeah.
But we went in a final or semi-final. We were one run away, whatever, right? But if you look at that particular one, let's just look at the one that I was referring to with Hansi as captain. Again, I'm going to sound a little bit philosophical here now when I say this, okay? But if we look at that in retrospect of what we now know, what happened with Hansi Cronje and that whole saga and what was happening behind the scenes, underground or hidden from our obscurity at that point, were we actually worthy to carry that cup if we had to have won it in that year, right?
Whether we want to blame,
yeah, that's my point. If you want to blame Donald for dropping the bat or not running or whatever, that's not the point here. The point is, if on a deeper level, are we actually carrying ourselves like potential champions that we can be regarded as champions? With the cup, without the cup, you're still champions, right? We probably weren't walking worthy because our main leader was dealing with a whole bunch of things behind the scenes. And inside that squad, there was a lot of things going on, right? So that is some of the metaphorical stuff that we're talking about. Are we actually really genuinely walking worthy of receiving such glory? And can we handle the glory when we get it? Or would we take this glory of being a winner now and go bash the next guy with this thing? We're world champions. Let us keep showing you, and we're going to keep doing it the same way. Because what happens is, if I give you success and I give you endorsement with a whole bunch of accreditation now after winning a cup, you're going to repeat the thing that brought you the cup. Right? So is that really what we want to represent to the world? That this is the only way we know how to play? Surely we have skilled and talented individuals with unique flair and diversity in South Africa that we can bring that to the fore, and that can be our niche to the game of cricket as a whole, right? We do not necessarily have to add on this extra dominant slants of bossing and intimidating and all of those sorts of things, these aggressive things, because that aggression is pseudo-aggression, which simply means it can turn to depression and it can turn to suicide because you now became this dominant, know-how people, this valuable commodity of a person, right? Recognizable figure on the basis of this fragility, right? Because we use, like in terms of, as you said, bowling and batting, we use the Andre Nels back in the day. We use the Dale Steins. As nice a guys as some of these guys are, we still use the intimidatory factor to get it over. Because now we say on the field, we're mean machine, we're taking it on, whatever. Off the field, we're gentlemen and we're greeting each other and whatever. But Michael Holding and those guys didn't necessarily have to do that. Wasim Akram's, you know what I mean? There's no need for spitting in each other's faces, and I use that metaphorically. I'm just saying, we don't need to have that sort of slants and approaches. So the game can be escalated for the future of these kids that are watching, right? That is the next generation. That is the reason why we're saying you are misrepresenting us with going with that spirit of approach. And therefore, you're not going to necessarily walk worthy of the cup and therefore win it. And we don't want you to win it until you grow up. Stop acting like a brat, essentially. Because that's basically how brats operate. They don't know each other, so they start bullying and they start forcing their way, right? And essentially, that is kind of our masked persona when we go to this World Cup, and it comes to the prevalence, because we kind of hide away when we go to series. We play very well because we kind of obscured a little bit further, and we do well there. We compete well there, but for the most part, that's the thing that kind of saying, "Oh, this is actually really what is under the covers here, and it's always been there. It's just that it's more obvious now." Right.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the key thing that needs to be addressed. And I don't know if that deep work is really getting done. I don't think a month, a year is going to make a difference. If you're going to start from scratch and not taking everything in cognizance, you're
Mm,
not necessarily going to do that. And we all kind of need to change that energy and say, yes, you're right. We don't actually know who we are. And hence people are actually placing labels on us. They're giving us a tag label because we're
mm,
not calling ourselves whatever. We're not
yeah.
labeling ourselves and accepting, no, don't call me that. That's not right to call me that. I am this. Or
Mm,
I may have been known as that, but thank you for that historical reminder. I've now grown from there. I remember where I've come from, but this is who I am now. You know, that's what we need to kind of do.
yeah.
And I think that hard work is what needs to from all sectors so that we can add this energy and the fuel of that sort of
Mm,
thing.
yeah. Yeah. You actually you alluded to something I wrote down a bit earlier. Yeah. I wonder if there's a bit of a fear of success too. It wasn't your exact words, but because our identity is potentially a bit fragile and kind of not well defined. And I like what you say towards the end there, that we've got to define that. We've got to spend more energy on that. And we know Cricket South Africa is I think the world's best at following other people. Oh, this works in Australia. Let's do that. Okay, England is doing this now. Let's do that. Within our budget constraints, because we can't do the things that cost pounds, a lot of pounds. We can't do that, but we'll do the parts that we think we can do. They got baseball now, so maybe we got to do something similar. Versus saying, hang on, stop the bus. In my mind, stop the bus. What's it actually going to take for us to walk around as people that, because we have an understanding that performance comes from the inside, because we understand that it's not just a skill game. There's this other part that plays a huge part. It might be a small part, right? You need the skill. If you don't have the skill, you're not going to compete at all. So that stuff's important. But there's this part that influences everything. And unless we nail that, we're not setting ourselves up in the right way. And I do hear what you say about the spirit within which we do things, right? And I love actually the reference. I've never thought of it before, like the whole Hansi Cronje thing. And yes, maybe we weren't in a place. We weren't doing things in the right spirit. It was undercover, definitely far under the covers at that point in time. And it was all revealed to us.
Yeah.
And so there's in my thinking at this point in time is like, we've got to stop following. We really have to sit down and define what that winner is and teach ourselves how to be that first, and then let the skills that we have that will be there, because we have this work ethic, because we have the spirit of fight, of the resilience, like that backbone is there, but it's almost like we've got to add on. We're not just fighters. We're not just resilient. So we can, when our backs is against the wall, we can. But when our backs is not against the wall, we can also. Versus saying, because when you're pushed into a corner, if you can't go further, you'll just crumble and you'll give in. And I think that's what tends to happen. We're fighting, and then we get to a place where, okay, shucks, the fight is now gone. We can't fight anymore. Now it's no longer about the fight. It's about who I am. And I'm actually the little kid sitting in the corner that hasn't resolved some issues, for lack of a better description at this point in time.
Let me jump into something.
We haven't grown up. We haven't learned to stand up in that corner and say, hang on, enough of this now. This is how we're going to do it. I'm not going to be bullied by you, and I'm not going to just stand here in the corner and throw my fists. I'm actually going to stand up and say, this is who I am. This is who we are. This is how we're going to do things. And this is the spirit in which we're going to do it. And then learn to do that in every T20 series, in every 50 over series, in every test series, in everything leading up to a World Cup. Because I agree with you 100%. We have this tendency in South Africa. The amount of phone calls I get for Jody, will you come and spend a day with us, and fix my team? I just say no to that. Like, I'm not down for that anymore. That's not the type of work I do. If you want a quick fix, you know what? Go read a book. You can get a quick fix in a book. That's not the approach to this stuff. The approach to this is, in my mind, is to say it is important. We can acknowledge that it's important. And because it is so important, we are going to make sure that we start paying attention to it. We want full-time staff in places, whether it's 3 people that go around the country and they service the needs of as many as they can. Every cricket team in South Africa has a batting coach, has a bowling coach, has a fielding coach, has a head coach, has an assistant, has like a team manager. And you say, okay, cool. And your mental coach, no, we got somebody. He comes in, he sits in the back of the room, if once a week, maybe 2 times a year, we get to see our mental guy or our team culture guy or whatever it might be. And I think part of this conversation is that if we are really serious about shifting the dynamic and the conversations and the narratives within South Africa, we'll understand that this part that is super important, that yes, the elite cricketers, the elite cricketer, maybe all his life he doesn't have to focus on this because he's working on his skill, and now his skill is exceptional and he can sit, or she too can sit in that space. But they have zero awareness of self. They have zero understanding of how they get to be at their best. They have zero understanding how to be a great teammate and how to play well with others. They have zero understanding at times of, and I say zero, it might not be an actual zero. I'm just meaning like limited, right? Restricted awareness of who they are, what they do, how they go about themselves. And in South Africa, we really have this unique diversity. And I don't think we're tapping into that enough. I don't think we're tapping into a Black African batter developed in a township, and it's different and it's unique. It's very much regimented at times. This is how an opening batter looks. This is how a number 3 batter looks. Still to this day in certain parts, not necessarily everywhere, but at certain schools, certain cricket academies, you can see that guy was coached by that because every person that comes out of that academy looks like this, walks like this. But yet we're so diverse, we're so unique. There's so much that we can add that we just don't, because I think we're very much, there's one way, this is the way. You call it the bully way. I don't know if I've got such a clearly defined term for it, but I get that, right? I get that sense that it's a hard approach, like, be tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to elaborate on 2 points you brought up massively, and I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful the way it's come out. The one thing is just a subtle, I don't know if it's a plug or some sorts, but you can look at the evolution of how the game has gone over the years when we became professional, right? Back in the day, you used to have a head coach, and an assistant coach, and that's pretty much it, right? And then all of a sudden, you started realizing that in order to compete with the rest of the world, we needed to be the fittest team around. Then we had fitness experts join, and then we couldn't necessarily sustain a professional team without physios. So physios for injuries and things like that needed to be on board and traveling. And then it was an add-on to a video analyst, a performance analyst, where data became this essential component. So there's this evolution in the game consistently. And I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. Then specialists and spinners and certain conditions and all of those sorts of things. And this is what I found that while I was an analyst in the system, by the way, one of the first in the country at the time, and I knew how these pioneering things evolve and how things need to ebb and flow with evolution. There's time where you start to realize that the conversations that's being had with you in a safe space is criticalness where the guys are not having psychological safety, and how to find this whole teaming aspect of the diversity that we have to navigate. And when we get ins and outs of leadership that's coming in with a unique brand, and we have to kind of surrender to this new leadership style instead of being liberated to play as a team. That nuance, we're not even looking at that at all. And we are missing out massively, and we've been put so far behind compared to the rest of the world. And this is why this type of soft skills, mental conditioning, capitalist culture, whatever, all those things speak in that direction. And only now have we got someone to be included at the national level, but it should be everywhere. Where's the women's performance coach, if you want to call it that, or culture catalyst or whatever? Where everyone should be having this, because this is the thing that makes us work as a team. So that's a little bit of maybe blind to what's actually happening right in front of us. And we're so delayed, and we blame it on there's not enough budget. In actual fact, at this point in time, you can probably get rid of some of their previous guys. They don't need to be full-time. I personally don't think you need to have a full-time fitness person traveling with you. I personally don't think you need a full-time, because those guys are now throwing balls in the nets and warming up and doing more things, right? You don't necessarily need a full-time physio perhaps traveling with you, or you know what I mean? You can get one at the ground wherever you're going to, or whatever. I'm just saying, I'm just using a
Mm,
hypothetical situation. Or even an analyst. The analyst,
mm,
the information is so redundant because the game is constantly the same. You're playing the same people week in, week out. So what things you need to know? Besides, you're taking away the instinct sometimes of what players already know, how to get another player out, or score runs off, or whatever, right?
mm,
So those type of things have evolved, and we kind of lagging behind in terms of our thinking, and we're still going according to old mechanisms
mm,
of creating success. But the game has changed, and we haven't
mm.
realized it. So
Yeah.
that's the one point I wanted to make. I don't know if you want to say
Mm.
something into that, because
I
I don't
want to
want to.
comment on that. I want to comment on that. I hope you have your other point. So
Oh,
and it's maybe just a practical example, right, for people watching and listening. So end of last year, I had a conversation. I'm not going to say the player's name due to confidentiality reasons, but end of last year, I had a conversation with a cricketer who plays franchise cricket or first class cricket, provincial cricket in South Africa. And at the end of every game, he didn't have a great season up until that time. At the end of it's a cricketer I've known for a long time, so I actually reached out to him. I was saying, "Hey, what's happening here? Do you want to have a chat?" He's like, "Yeah, please, let's have a chat." So, okay, great. Through the conversation, what I became aware of was, so he was suggested by his coaching staff that he change his batting style. Okay, without going into too much detail. So there was a technical change he needed to make in his batting. And how it was positioned by the coaching staff was, if you do this, you will be more ready to play the ball. Okay. So we're making a technical, a physical, an external world change to you so that you'll be more ready to play the ball. I said to him, but how ready are you to play the ball? Like how ready are you actually to play the ball? And he sort of said he's not very ready because in the bowler's run up, so this is a cricketer in South Africa playing a first class game, played SAA towards the end of the year, who in the bowler's run up is worried about where his feet's going, where his hands going, where his head's going, because he will be ready to play the ball. You're not ready to face the ball if you're worried about where your foot goes when a guy's going to be bowling at 150 at you, right? And so I think that's, to me, that's such a clear example of the conversation you are having, that he has a player that wants to perform to the best of his ability. He wants to go out there and not choke under pressure. He wants to go out there and lift a cup or win a trophy or score hundreds. But he's not ready because his insides is not directed appropriately. He's not clear on, I'm this type of player. This is how I play. I've always played like this. He has a coach willy-nilly, to a certain extent, making a technical adjustment that actually just harms his ability to perform because our focus is so much on the external, right? And so I agree with you. We've got all this staff, and I think every department will blow their own horn, right? The nutritionist will say you can't perform without nutrition, and the strength and conditioning coach will say you can't perform without strength and conditioning. And I don't think my intention in this conversation isn't to say we're everything, right? The mental coaching, we need it all. We need it all. The intention of this conversation, as we're going through it, for me, is shifting to this idea that we are neglected. The soft skills, the internal work, the mental side is neglected severely. The focus is external. It lives in that space, and you can just go look at the staff that's built around people, right? It is the technical coaches, it's the strength and conditioning. It's just about the external world. It's what we get to see. And I had this image earlier where we were talking about the World Cup stuff. That's all we see on TV. So the technical analyst can only see what the camera shows him. But he cannot see the intention through which something is done. He cannot see the intent, the emotional experience, the thought that the player is busy having. So this cricketer, their thinking is nowhere near ready for performance. They're not thinking about where's the gap. They're not thinking about how am I going to bat at 3 and over here? What's my plan? They're not clear on any of that because they're worried about where their foot must go, you know? Yeah, that's what I just wanted to tag on there. Just give a little bit of an example of how it can potentially play out for an individual.
Yeah. No, that's crucial. And I think those type of things are kind of placed on or assumed that the coaches would be able to handle. But also with their positions, because they've taken ownership and they got skin in the game, and there's so much weight of them needing to either choose the right individuals for, kind of combating whatever opposition and overcoming and winning, that a lot of the time that type of tough work is relegated and go sort yourself out to deal with on your own. Now, I'm an advocate for self-management because you need to get the player to that form of maturity. But there needs to be someone that can be willing and observant of the fact that you need to listen. Let me help you look in the mirror and show you exactly what's going on here and walk you through it. A kind-hearted person or someone who's no threat. Like, you know what I mean? There's no, it's not going to affect your selection in any way. You're a safe guy to be approached. So someone needs to be there to be able to do that. And we found the value in having those sorts of individuals in the teams. Because it's the same old adage whether you're playing junior cricket or senior cricket at the highest level, those players come off and say, what does the coaches have to say about this or that or that? They're consumed by other people's opinions about them, particularly if leadership over them. So they carry themselves and they need a space to kind of safe space so they can either vent or prepare themselves for the next time when they're going to battle. It's almost an essential. And what we were saying earlier is not competing one versus another kind of skill set or value add, right? It's more a matter of can we read the age in which we're going into and where we are as South Africa right now? What is really vitally important for us? Are we tired of being what did you call earlier? Almost like this, we must grow up now. We at this age now that we need to kind of mature, right? So are we still going to get stuck in that phase, or would we actually mature and accept that these things are part and parcel of the game? Because the cricketers themselves say that non-technical aspects are higher percentage, close to 70, even higher than technical stuff, but they pay no attention to it. So it's kind of an obscure situation of why it's actually like this. But we need to wake up to it and say, let's change that narrative, right? But just to go back to that child version of identity for a second, right? Remember, if we are assumingly that we're right and we assess this incorrectly, if we are a child version of ourselves and not knowing who we are, right? Because maybe under the age of 13, you haven't really matured. You're not coming to your own, so you're not quite sure, particularly with boys, it can be for girls as well. But you don't really know who you are. So simply at that point in time, the input from the outside can be heavy on you, right? It can be directing you positively and negatively because you're taking all this signals and it's having to decipher that and to figure out exactly who you are. Almost like this rite of passageway. So if you don't have someone that's overseeing that, you're not necessarily going to get to that maturity in a fashion, right? And now we are saying to those, call it adolescents in a way, or maybe even younger, the smaller kids, right? We are saying to them, just go get the victory because then you'll feel like an adult. You'll feel like you accomplished. You want to add this victory to them. This is what they're actually scared of. That small little inner child that doesn't know who he is, is trying to define himself, not individually, as a team, right? Doesn't know who they are, who they represent. Now you want to give them this acclaim or this precious thing of this glory. And that success is actually pretty scary to that kid. You don't give a Ferrari to a 13-year-old and say, okay, my boy, go ride, dude. See what you can do with this car. They don't have the capacity to handle that success, right? It's unwise to do that. So at the same time, what you referred to earlier, I think as a nation, we're actually scared of winning this because then we have to walk worthy of being champions, and we don't have the capacity to do that because our identities are very fractured. It's undefined. So to put this success on undefined terms, it's like you're wasting it. You're throwing it to nothing, right? And you don't know how to handle it. So for me, that is why the tag is put there until we decide to grow up, take the tag away, and then define ourselves. We need to really be able to do that. And if I can slightly just add on and allude to what we were speaking about yesterday, And I'm going to say it a little bit harshly, but it's a fair statement in a sense, right? For the majority of it, when we've come from that historical background, that cultural approach of excellence hasn't worked, to be honest, because it's come through all the years, right? We haven't got success. So it's failed consistently. And even now, there's an admission to say we're not even getting the Black African thing right when we're pushing that narrative, right? We're not getting the numbers through the selection and so forth. But it has failed consistently. We won series, we became number one, but we didn't win a World Cup. So it's constantly failed. And it's proven to be something that's elusive. And it's elusive because the fact that our fractured identity is, if we were to win, we don't have a solid enough identity to sustain that glory, because it's nonetheless, and I'm going to say it, it's this, when we spoke about it yesterday with the ranking scenario, right? We automatically assume that white was right, and then Indian, then, that whole katut, right? Colored and so forth. But we assumed a way. And for those who are right in the top there, as you said, it's dangerous for you to be in the top. Whether you're swapping it around now and black is in charge or white was in charge, it doesn't matter. The point is you become quite pompous and pretentious because you think you're the privileged guy and having the answers. But you deep inside yourself know you don't have the answers. You need all of us to come together equally so that we can collectively define who we are. Because that's who we are as a nation, a rainbow nation. So everybody needs to play a part in defining that identity, right? And if we don't give credence for those voices to have that say, we're not going to have the identity established enough so that when we say we are champions, we are definitely working worthy of it. So when someone is in a privileged position, in a hierarchical position, essentially what they're doing is they're subjugating, they're pushing down and suppressing other people who are less than. And that's kind of how it's been with our approach to the game. We kind of want to come in either as top dogs, or if you what you were saying just now, all right, we're not top dogs when we're approaching this, we're the underdogs now, we're coming in under the radar, and then we play well. As soon as we get to the stage where it's now semifinals again and knockout stages, and then the camera is focusing on us now. Oh, cool, you surprised us in this build-up. What now? Then all of that fragile nature, because we haven't defined it, they haven't brought everyone equally to the table, now comes to the fore, and that pressure mounts, and this little scared kid saying, oh, I want to do this for home, for daddy and mommy at home, but I feel like a small kid, and I don't know who I am. I don't know how to get this. And then they break down in tears.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that respectfully again.
Yeah. I wonder, right? I do have in the back of my head this thought. I read a book a while ago. I can't even remember the name of the book. And it was about Australian cricket, and the whole book was sort of written about their identity and essentially where it comes from. The whole idea around the baggy green and what that means and what it stands for. And a lot of that today, and I think I read this book early 2000s, so we're talking about more than 20 years ago that I read this book, definitely. Even what we have today is built on the things that Donald Bradman achieved in the 1930s and the way he went as an individual. So the book was sort of positioned in that way, right? What happened pre him, and where their cricket was at. And then he came along and what that meant and how they started playing. And the Invincibles, they toured to the UK where they toured for 3 or 4 months and didn't lose a single cricket game. And how the history of that is still intertwined with the narrative of the Australian cricketer today. That when they put that cap on, it's not just I put a cap on. It's I'm putting a cap on that has this history and heritage. If you go to rugby in South Africa, if you put a rugby jersey on, you're putting a rugby jersey on with a narrative of I'm a winner, because it happened. First World Cup, I think it was the first one that we could play and we win it in South Africa, right? So the narrative was straight away connected with if we wear a rugby jersey, we're a winner. The narrative of the South African story is we're not winners yet, and maybe the yet doesn't even exist in that sentence. It's just we're not winners, we're chokers. There we go again, same old. And so I always have the sense that it's going to take 15 special people that's part of a World Cup squad, and it's going to take a very special support staff, and it's going to take, I think, where my mind maybe shifted in our conversations, it's going to take a special cricketing community, to really start doing things differently, not following others, not doing the same as we've always done, investing not just in the hard skills, but the soft skills. So you're covering things more holistically. And I think that's special already, because the type of person that's open and willing to look in the mirror and become self-aware, become aware of what meaning they are assigning to things and how they are thinking about things and how things are then playing out from that, is to a certain extent a rare individual by itself. It's not everyone that does that. It's not everyone that stands up in the morning and says, how do I really become a better person today? How do I actually get to stand up and show up as the best version of me? It's a rare individual that does that every single day. And I think our cricketing system shows that we have an understanding that that's important. We've got Tom with the national team now, and I'm hoping that his role is, because I know he was involved with the rugby, and I think he's not doing the rugby anymore. So I'm hoping that his role becomes more permanent, and that there are people below him, whether that's me and you, or whether it's other people, but that there's people within the ecosystem that can start supporting this agenda to say there's more to the game. And we've got to do more, be seen as doing more, to drive, not just because we got phenomenal work ethic. We've got to put the effort and energy into stuff in South Africa is not difficult. And the people that they don't go anywhere. It's as simple as that, right? But we've got enough cricketers that are willing to do the work and put in the effort. And so if we can, in my mind, if we can shift these ideas that you and I are lifting the covers on, that there's soft skills. There is an understanding of how do we do this in our unique way. There is an understanding of tapping into and defining our own identity that's making us worthy of winners, not trying to steal or borrow it from somebody else or to plaster it on our faces knowing that it's going to crumble afterwards. I really hope that through this conversation and hopefully through others that come from this, that we can shift that mindset. We can shift the focus a little bit to not just outside, but also a little bit on the inside.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. Obviously, like I said, the game has already changed and changing. And if we don't, acknowledge that, it's kind of going to be to our own detriment. We're going to pay the price for it ultimately. There is some sort of engagement with it now, as you said earlier. And I like the fact that we already starting to have these conversations and offering what our know-how. This is a free platform. We're sharing ideas which moves people. We're sharing concepts that we've learned and we've experienced ourselves. And we're sharing openly because our intention is to move everyone forward in a positive manner, right? That's why we're doing this. So that the narrative can change and we can feel empowered by it for our future generations, our kids and so forth, right? Coming up in a South Africa that feels, oh my goodness, when we say sport is an identity for ourselves, it really is because we take a lot of pride from it because it truly is reflective of us, all of us, right? All forms of call it race groups and classes and whatever, right? Wherever you come from, sectors. So that's the whole aim and the objective of what we're trying to do. And this Chokers tag is an opportunity for us to find our way to each other so that when we have these conversations, we get closer and closer and closer towards each other and we overcome it together.
Yeah. If we had to put a tag on our national team, and I haven't got an answer to this, right? The thought just came to my head. If there was a tag that if you were in that environment, right, at this point in time, leading into the World Cup, and there was a tag you could put on the team to help with an understanding or to help move us forward, what would that be? Like, what would you think could be a cool tag to add?
Slightly difficult because you would obviously want to kind of pick up the nuances. That's the nature of what we do, right? We come in and kind of pick up the energy, the atmosphere. And we kind of would assess and say, right now, this seems to be something that's floating about the teams. Maybe we bring it up in conversations in a corporate setting and in a group setting, and we kind of assess if it's a strong push. And then we drive it kind of home in a sense, right? So I think they have reservations because this particular World Cup is, again, it's a T20, so the nature and the format suggests that this can be anyone can win it because you have more chance for call it the up and coming underdog in Afghanistan. They can take a tournament, for instance, because the game is shortened, right? And so therefore, with their unique spinners under turning conditions, whatever, and some of their good gun batters, as in the terminology currently,
Mm,
you never know. It can actually go to some obscure team. So with T20, the nature is that it's anyone's game, right? However, when you come into this type of tournament, you have to be kind of rock solid on your approach and saying whatever's been, we can build on these are the strong points
mm,
that we've definitely pulled out from the last time or what we've been doing or where you guys have been and now coming together. And we need to tap into this because this is the energy I'm picking up from most of you.
mm,
And for me, I wouldn't drive it if I was the performance coach of that team. I wouldn't be driving it from conceptualizing the idea or prescribing it from afar.
mm,
I wouldn't come sit at my table at home and figure what does the approaches need. I'll rather go in the room, have discussions with the existing pre-15 that's there and the grander group, and say, guys, inside this room is enough talent and intellectual know-how, and possibly even championship experience amongst them there, right? How do we get this over line? Because this is a stumbling block or something that we need to do, take a leaf from. There's enough here that can get us there, but I'm not going to dictate it even if I'm the head coach or the support
yeah,
staff or whatever, I'm not going to
yeah,
dictate it. The wisdom
mm,
lies within each of you because at the end of the
mm,
day, if you take ownership and you put on the table what you think is valuable, that's something that you're going to drive through in the
mm,
performance side. And don't neglect the fact that where you've come from plays a part in that. So let's
mm,
get those stories out early. And don't think that you are special bunch purely only on its own. There is this history which they talk about players before and players to come, that whole kind of concept. But give cognizance of that. This green baggy green thing you spoke about earlier.
mm,
We have that in writing, by the way. We have those sorts of things written up, but we haven't really lived according to that in crunch moments, where
mm,
that's the thing that sustains us. But the power lies with individuals in the room. So often in South African context, we have the dominance of who's the thought guy. It's not Tom that's going to have the answers to that. He's going to
mm,
facilitate it, but the
mm,
answers lie with the players and everyone else who can make a contribution. Tom needs to facilitate an amalgamation or a gelling of that in a sense.
mm,
Right? And if he can do that well in his leadership capacity, and then we're going to get somewhere. So
mm,
the point is, like I once heard this phraseology, managing and kind of dictating certain prescribed ways of approaches, even in selection sometimes. No, this is my best 15. I have to choose it, and this is me. I'm choosing it, right? Selection could have been done differently. You could have had input from
mm,
the core players, and they can say, we work well together. I think you should get so and so and so. But we're
mm,
not radical enough in our thoughts in that way. That's another point, by the way.
mm,
But often in times when we get to those crunch matches in those World Cups, then people tend to want to flex their muscles and show why they're there. Right?
mm,
I'm talking about support staff and so forth. And when they do that, they derail it because the answers is in the room already with the players.
mm.
So this is how you deal with it. The key to management really is to get rid of managers and give
Yes.
it back to the management on the player. Let the
Yeah.
player manage themselves. Right. And that
Yes.
for me would be my approach. I would be
Yeah.
saying the intellect and the know-how of how to get over the line is with you, but we don't know how much of a fragile child is on the inside of you.
Mm,
Have you actually grown up enough and collectively can we come together so that we as a team, it's not 1 plus 1 that's equaling 2. It's 1 plus 1 that's equaling 11 that you're competing
mm,
against because
yeah.
everyone is bringing their part. I've heard
Mm,
that recently, by the way, it's a borrowed term, but I
yeah.
find it beautiful synergy for the game. So
Yeah. 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 We're more
that's
than the sum of our parts, right? That's the
exactly.
thing that, Yeah, we're more than the sum of our parts. So I think, and I appreciate your answer, right? I do appreciate your answer, because it's in the work we do, that's the way that we do it, right? That is the belief we have, is that the answer lies within. However, I'm going to put you on the spot again.
Okay.
I'm going to put you on the spot again. And I think the reason I do this, and I know you haven't thought about it because it's not something we've discussed, but it just came to me. And I'm sort of thinking about this at the same time myself. We have a tag as chokers. It's a tag that exists. If we had to have a tag that could support us in winning this thing, like, what could that tag rather be? What could it look like? That's maybe sort of what I'm trying to allude to in this question. Like, if mom and dad had to sit on the couch and we had to cultivate an understanding of, if every time we say we're chokers, all we're doing is reinforcing the old, what could we rather be saying? What could we rather be encouraging? What could be the label we start attaching? Whether they succeed or fail, right? Because failure is a huge part of cricket. It's 70% of the game in all the individual disciplines. I mean, the best cricket teams that have ever existed, if you take that Australian team, they have a winning percentage of maybe 80%. So there's still a 20% failure rate there, you know? So failure is there all the time. What could a tag be that we could rather start associating with this team that could show that we have an understanding, you know, of that there's more, you know, like we're heading in the right direction. We're starting to think as champions. We're starting to think as winners. We're starting to be that first before expecting it to happen. Yeah. I don't know if you've got any idea, right? I know it's putting us both on the spot here.
Yeah. So what you hoping for is possibly a replacement on the existing tag. So if we're gonna,
Yes.
you know, like, so for instance, in a scenario when someone's an addict or someone's a smoker, so instead of smoking, picking up a cigarette, I'm gonna pick up sweets instead. I'm gonna suck
yes. Like, what's that replacement therapy or whatever? I don't know if that's the right term for it, you know.
So
like, what could be some options for that? Because if we say we are chokers, oh, there we go, we're choking again. That's speaking to identity, which is what we've spoken about throughout this conversation to a certain extent. So what identities can we start attaching to ourselves? And I know we've alluded to like winners, and I don't know if they're as catchy, maybe, you know? Yeah.
So I'm gonna say two things, but it's not necessarily a phrase or like a choker's tag thing, whatever. But I'm gonna say two things that came to mind straight away. And I don't know how it plays out and where it's gonna go. It's obviously an initial raw thought.
Yeah.
Because you're putting me on the spot here. But anyway, the point is, I think the tag in and of itself, you have to go directly for it. So you have to hit it like smack bang. You have to accept it as is. So which means I will take the tag and use the tag phraseology directly and swing it to my advantage. So instead of calling ourselves the chokers tag, which will always be there, we know that, we acknowledge that. So I would say tag you it. You now it. You know the phrase, the kids thing, tag you it. So it's on you now. You the 15 that's there and you're representing us. So that's the first thing. So that's where ownership comes from.
Yeah.
So tag you it.
Right? You're the tag now, right? You're at this point
tag
in time.
You it. You in it. You, that's your time to be the tag. Tag you it.
Okay.
That's the first thing. The second thing I'll do is the concept that we spoke about, also referring to the choking aspect we started with. I'll use the same analogy, and again, I don't know how you'll say it, but the objective is to be able to drink from the cup. Imagine this is the World Cup as a metaphor. If the objective is to have the cup and to be able to drink from it, because ultimately, you know what happens after we win. Any team that wins, they go back in the change room, they take a whole bunch of liquid, whatever liquid they use, they throw it into this cup, and everyone has an opportunity to metaphorically or symbolically drink from the chalice, the cup. So if the objective is to be able to secure the cup so that you can drink from it, I would suggest drink from it now with a sippy cup.
Yeah.
So sippy cup your way to eventually drinking in a proper manner.
Yeah.
So get small little tidbits now, tag you it,
Mm,
go and express what this champion looks like, walk worthy of the people that you're representing back home,
mm,
right? And make us proud whether you come back with a cup or not, because we know that you had a little taste of it through a sippy version, through a small
mm,
little child version of yourself. You sippy cup it away, and we can grow up into when the next tag team goes over there, they're no longer sippy cupping, they're drinking from the cup entirely.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
just, that's what
It's
I
not,
would say.
it's not necessarily a tag, but I do get your analogy, right?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
What did
Russell,
you
this
go
is
for?
geez, I don't know. I'm sitting here.
Yeah,
My
you
head
thought you could
straight.
get
No,
away
no, no.
from it.
Yeah. So my immediate response is when I hear questions like that is, my immediate response is normally, well, if I'm so I try to get very visual with it in my head. So like we started this conversation, like, okay, I'm drinking a sip of water, I'm choking. So what if I'm not that? Then what am I? If I'm not a choker, well, then I'm a person, say, who is very certain about how I swallow. you know, like, um, and so I don't know. I don't know if there's a tag in that, right? But
Yeah.
there's a certainty. There's a surety. There's a clarity. There's a solid foundation on which I'm standing and I'm walking and moving from. Not so even if that solid foundation right now might mean the acknowledgement and the acceptance that, you know what, I might be also still sitting in the corner. And look, this could be a very individual thing. Some of these players, I don't know them all that well. Some of them might be investing in this type of stuff, and they might be, they might be more mature in terms of our analogy, of the little kid sitting in the corner.
Mm.
But maybe it's just the acceptance that, hey, I'm actually the little kid sitting in the corner, and I've got some growing up to do. Maybe it's just that for now, and then that's okay, because that's your next step. That's your next little, your next little sip out of the cup, so that you go the next step.
Mm.
That would be my sort of take. I don't know if I've got. I normally have to go and like look in the dictionary and find some words, but maybe it can stir some imagination in people to say, okay, maybe here's a tag I can rather associate with this team, and their growth and their development. And so instead of referring them as the choker, we can start referring to them in a way that indicates we're taking the step, maybe. And we're taking it from a foundation and understanding, and we're taking the next step and the next step and next step.
Yeah. So, Jody, I think yours will lean to that identity thing. It comes through strong for me when I'm hearing you speak. And I think maybe what you just shared now might be linked back to the identity thing. I think that's where your clarity will come from. So that's why you define this, little kid that's struggling. But you can give it some more thought. I'm sure maybe through the tournament, through the World Cup,
We'll find one. We'll find one.
for
Hopefully,
the next World Cup.
Hopefully, it's for the next World Cup. Yeah.
I think also just to add on, I mean, before we kind of shoot off this thing in this concept, just the one thing, the landscape of cricket domestically, if you look at I'm throwing, this is a big concept, but I'm just throwing it in now. The landscape look like the performance, there's highly talented individuals, but the performance is subdued. It's very much a lower standard of performance, right? Domestically. And this gap between the national team and the domestic is obviously a big abyss, and people struggle with that leaping that gap. So for me, this we need to kind of the collective energy of where we are as a nation, not the individual strong performances like superstars that we had of times past and current, right, and future. Not those individual ones. Collectively, we are quite, very much immature. We're very subpar. We're very way below. We have the potential and the growth and the talent, but we really need to start waking up how to team and call out potential in each other together. And that's why I'm saying when you're talking about defining this, the tag for the team, it's not the individual, it's more the collection of that team, the brand Proteas. Because remember, one thing that happened in times past is also historically the residue that's handed down to us, like a baton exchange, is that, and still being pushed today, right? Still being pushed today consistently, is that a Proteas brand is still inferior to an individual brand of cricketer. So, for instance, the Proteas brand's value in a unfair, obnoxious manner, actually, which is that what we created, is actually less than a Clarkson or a Quinton de Kock or whatever. And it's actually encouraged that way. And times past, we had the Jacques Colors and we bolstered up with Graham Smith and whoever, right? We put all these names, whatever. And those names we kind of respect, we altered it up, and they became and were encouraged to be bigger. So commercially, we invest into those names and we esteem them and we throw all this energy towards them. But not so much the Proteas band like the baggy green. You know what I mean? The balance between the two, we kind of completely gave away. And we threw again external support to the establishment of individual brands where people are encouraged and said, no, go protect your brand, go promote your brand, enhance your brand because you need to use it and monetize your brand even, right? And that's where the external stuff becomes even far worse. So guys are now concerned about, I need appearance fees, I need to be paid for all of these things, instead of growing the character on the inside that stands worthy of that brand, which is under a bigger umbrella brand of the Proteas. And this is why I said this to a CEO, Gerald Majola, once. You're in danger because a domestic cricket match is sold out within 24 hours ahead of a national team that's going to be appearing at this game, at this ground.
Yeah.
The national team wasn't sold out at all, but in 24 hours, the domestic game was sold out. It was a final, but nonetheless. So those are the indications that your brand, your national brand, is not as strong, and you got this thing lopsided. You're enhancing individual brands. So these are kids, fragile kids, but they look grown up. It's fragile, and at moments they crash and burn. And then under the bigger collective thing, no, that's a scared kid. You can't win. And that's the kind of assessment of things.
Yeah. 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 Makes me think of players that would happily go back to their school. They'd go to their school to some awards or get invited down to the nets, maybe by their old coach. They'll happily go do that because there is there's a relationship and maybe there's an appreciation for the value that brought to their lives. But they're at times very reluctant to come give back to the Proteas. One or two, the doors are not that open for them to just come. There's part of our conversations yesterday that, you have to be in a certain way. And only if you're in a certain way, you can be here. You got to play by our rules. If you play your cards right, if I remember correctly, was sort of,
yeah. And also,
brilliant.
though, let me show this as well. Just one last thing regarding that statement, because I couldn't resist it now. There's this there's this phraseology that says, of quite funny, again, it's borrowed, it's not my own. If you're giving back, you've taken too much.
Okay. You're going to have to just explain that a little bit to me. If you're giving back.
If you're giving back right now, like that's your focus, you want to go and give back now. That's an indication that you took too much. Which means when you went in and you were the prize possession back in the day, right? You took way too much for yourself. Now you feel, hey, I need to go give back now. When you were doing that up and coming, you needed to have been concerned about taking just enough for yourself, which was worthy to you, but making sure that you're giving back in the process of establishing yourself. So what we were just talking about now earlier, they were encouraged to build their own brand. So you kept taking, and now you want to give back to South Africa, or South Africa's closing the door because you've taken so much already. There's no point in coming back now because there's no more to take. Because the whole concept is about taking more. Bring your gravy, what do they call this thing? Wheelbarrow. And come keep cashing in on the gravy train here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of getting more now. It's actually a matter of, wait a minute, by the time you will keep taking, because the sun was out and things were going, you were cashing in. And now you feel you're compelled to give back. You took too much. So that's the open. Every time people say they're coming to give back because of what the game is given, essentially during that time whilst they were cashing in or receiving, they should have been giving back then already. So it will make it easier to constantly keep, I'm just living life. So as I'm being benefited, I want to share that with Eva.
Mm,
You don't need to keep charging. I just want to keep sharing because
mm,
I've been blessed. I can be a blessing to others. I've been given something I can share with others, right?
mm,
So if you have to give back, most likely you took too much.
mm. Yeah. Okay, cool. I get it. I get it. Yeah. Russell, this conversation has been fun. I've really enjoyed. I've enjoyed the times that we've spent together, but in particular, this conversation I've really, really enjoyed. Um, I hope that the people that get value from this, again, please just share it. You know, like we want to just get the message out, right? We want to get the message out to get people to think a little bit differently. You know, what am I actually busy with as an individual? You know, is my identity well enough defined? Like, do I know as just a person sitting on the couch? Am I
Yeah.
that well defined that if the Proteas win or lose on the TV, you know, I can say, hang on, we're something different. We're more than what we've assigned ourselves in the past. Now, maybe to my child or my kids I coach or in the office where I go, I can speak a different language and I can start telling a different story and we can start shifting the narrative a little bit around what the Proteas are, what they mean to us as South African citizens, and what that means about what they can achieve, you know, and how we're raising the next set of Proteas that have to come and carry the torch forward based on everything else that's happened before.
Yeah. Well said. I don't want to add anything further to that. That is well
Cool.
said. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. See you in the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.